Hello world of YouTube and welcome to another episode of Viral's Movie Reviews, the show where I take a look at movies that you guys suggest, I go to the movies and see, or I feel like discussing. And guys, I did it! I went back to a movie theater for the first time in over a year. It was exciting. It was everything I'd hoped it would be as far as a theater experience could go. And the movie I saw was A Quiet Place 2, directed by John Krasinski, and a film that I was excited to see. You know, I saw the first one in theaters. I thought it was a great theater experience. I thought that it was a movie with well-executed scares. It was a good, tense film that had great thematics of family. You know, it had some fun camera stuff, some fun sound stuff, given the concept was revolving around these monsters that are very sensitive to sound, and they utilized that very well with this sound mixing and everything in the first film. And I had seen that this film was getting massive praise, and yet I don't agree with a lot of the critical praise this movie is getting. I was very disappointed with A Quiet Place 2. The theater experience was still great. That tension in the audience from, you know, feeling immersed in the world was still there. But I had a disconnect from the world that I didn't have in the first movie. And I'll talk about a lot of that in a minute. Before I get to the negative, I will talk about the positive, because it's not all bad. This movie did have stuff that I thought was well done. I thought the opening sequence, the day one intro, was great. I thought because it still did some of the quirks sonically that the first film did, but in this chaotic environment, it was used to great effect. I thought the camera work had a lot of fun moments. You know, the sequences with the bus or the revolving camera work was very flashy in a fun way. It was also a great way to introduce Cillian Murphy's character into the mix, who was a bigger component of this film. He sort of takes the anti-role that John Krasinski had, where John Krasinski was like a father figure. This is more like a failed hero in his own sense, which is an interesting dynamic, but I'll get to that later. I also like the transition in the end of the intro into where the film actually carries through the story and picks up in the basement of the house where they killed the first monster at the end of the first movie, and I liked that. I liked the dock sequence with Cillian Murphy and the daughter. I liked the daughter in this movie. I thought that she still brought that same level of performance that she did in the first film, and I think that, again, some of the instances where they toy with her deafness as far as like the audio mixing, it played for some great moments, like the train sequence. That was really cool. I liked Cillian Murphy in general. I think he's a great actor. I think he's good in this movie. I liked the sequence where Emily Blunt was going to get a thing for the baby. I liked the set piece of the factory. I thought the factory set piece was really an interesting choice, and I felt like it lent to more... it opened up the gates for more dialogue, which I felt like this film needed, given the family unit that was understanding of communicating through ASL was gone, so they needed to find a way for them to talk more, and I thought that the factory was a good idea with that. The furnace sequences were really nice. Like the furnace sequence with the kid was really tense. I like Jimon Honsoo. I think that he's not in the movie for very long, but he's a great actor, and I liked him here. He had some heart in his performance that I thought was good, but there's some big issues I have with this film that set it far back for me above a handful of that. And some of my issues undercut some of the things that I liked tremendously. I saw it with Rachel like I did the first one, and we talked about it afterwards, and she brought up a good point. You know, the first film didn't really have much of a score. It was a very quiet film, purposefully so. I felt like there was more score that washed through the movie. While it made the tense sequences more tense, it created a bigger juxtaposition with the scares that wasn't in the first movie. There were a lot of scares in the first movie. There were a lot of instances where they made you jump because sounds happened. But even in the instance of the first film, subtler things would happen and scare me in the same way that a jump scare would, because of the world that the first movie created. And I feel like in this movie, they go against some of that. There's a lot more talking in this movie. And while it works in the bunker sequences, there's sequences outside of that where I feel like if this were the first film, the monsters would be coming. You know what I mean? And it's stuff like that that I was thinking about as I was watching this movie. You know, I didn't like that aspect of it. And again, I know it was kind of a result of Cillian Murphy's character being the character that he is, but it was still just a frustrating aspect of the film that lingered throughout the moments where it cropped up.
But it was still a component that took me out of the world and made me feel less immersed in it, given it's a sequel to an already established world.
I do like that the one ASL line that he knows that was planted in the beginning had a good payoff in my favorite sequence of the film, which was the dock sequence. But going to the dock sequence, I hated how they structured and paced that whole stretch, where they kept cutting between Emily Blunt's story, Cillian Murphy and the daughter story, which had super Last of Us vibes, and the son being a fucking idiot. I hated the son by and large in this movie, especially with him by himself with the baby. You know, I get why he was there in the sequence where he does the thing that keeps him there. Oh my god. But, like, man, was he frustrating to watch throughout this entire film. Given he was in the first movie, it was frustrating to see him in this movie. And the frequency at which they kept cutting between those three storylines felt very... It cut the tension every single time. You know, I get that they were trying to go for, like, a spinning plates sort of style of tension where they were juggling three different things at once and trying to keep them wobbling without them falling over. But I felt like it failed its execution in that instance, because the two sequences could have either the Emily Blunt and the Cillian Murphy sequence could have been drawn out a little longer, at least shown a little more before weaving between the two, or they could have weaved between those a little better, you know. And I get why the son has this thing going on, because it's the catalyst for the conclusion of his and Emily Blunt's storylines, but the way that that was done was just incredibly frustrating. I also hate how this movie, and I'm going to get into spoiler territories here, so if you haven't seen the movie, go see it. If you like the first one and you want to see it, I don't blame you. I wanted to. Skip to this time code if you want to avoid spoilers. But I hated how this movie was essentially the first movie again. It was so frustrating, you know, to see them go through all of this trouble, you know, to find this place, this refuge for people, and to find out that the monsters have another weakness. But they don't even exploit that fully, and instead go for the same fucking ending as the first movie, you know, exploiting the weakness that we already know, was so underwhelming. You know, when the last shot lingers in the theater, I was like, really? Is it about to cut to black? And when it did, I was so mad. I was so mad because it made the film feel so inconsequential. You know, it made it feel so irrelevant in the grand scheme of things. You know, yes, there were things that I liked in the movie journey-wise, but the fact that at the end we reached the same resolve that we did in the first film, super disappointing to me. And again, it made some of the points, it made some of the journey feel irrelevant. And when really looking at the scope of the film, or looking at what goes on, it feels like there were portions of this that felt rushed. This whole film as a whole kind of flies by in a way that I wasn't expecting. I was kind of hoping it would stick around a little longer, you know, spend more time with things. But no, it kind of flies in and flies out, and you're done. And I felt really underwhelmed by it. I don't know, man. I see this movie getting a lot of praise, and it's shocking to me. Because I while there's things that I liked, I did not like some big components of the movie, and some of the core structure of the film was just very jarring and distracting to me. It removed me from the world in a way that the first movie did not do in its entire runtime. Every time it kept switching to things in the first movie, I was still incredibly engaged. But in this movie, there are points where I felt so disconnected from the things going on, or from the world at large. You know, the theater experience, while still everyone was sort of immersed in silence, I didn't feel that need to be. I felt so removed from everything in a way that I don't know, I was kind of upset by. But those are my thoughts on A Quiet Place 2. If I were to give it a score, it'd be like a 3 out of 10, like a 2 or a 3 out of 10. I'm sitting in a low place with this film, man. I was really underwhelmed by it. While there were things that I did like that I talked about, even some of the problems I had undercut some of those things that I liked in a way that was really disheartening to me. But what did you think about this movie? Did you like it? Let me know your thoughts on A Quiet Place 2 in the comments down below. If you did like this review, be sure to give it a like. If you want to see more of my music, gaming, and general nerdery content, be sure to subscribe. Special thanks to my patrons if you want to join the ranks to get early access to content, exclusive content, or to help drive the community. It's linked in the description. I'm going to get out of here, though. I have been Vowel Rack. You guys have good days, lives, and situations, and I'll see you another day.